All right, folks, welcome to the Harness IP 2025 annual holiday IP wrap up. I mean, what we could have said with a one or two words, we've said with many because we're patent attorneys after all. So let me introduce you to what we're going to do. Then we'll go about doing it. So this is our Christmas IP wrap up. It's two guys with as much credibility as we can muster with Santa hats on. And so everything we are going to reveal to you about Christmas and IP is all true, as they say. And we're going to do this in the roles of Carson and McMahon. Now, that may mean something to you or not, but we will switch off. And so whenever either of us is in the McMahon role, we will laugh heartily at what the other says, whether it's funny or not. Okay. So just understand when you hear, ha, ah, that means that's our internal laugh track here. All right. So this does count for CLE. So let's get started. Brian, if you would go to the next slide, please. This is being applied for CLE in a couple of places, Missouri, Texas, and Virginia. Now, each has a requirement or two. And I know in Virginia, for example, you have to be on a sign-up sheet and you have to grab off a couple of words as we go through the program. So just keep that in mind. And questions we welcome. I would probably put them in a text form though and send it to somebody who's looking at your questions. Otherwise, Brian and I may miss them. But for the rest of you, please stay on mute and enjoy and have fun. And so off we go. Next slide. Santa has been with us a good long time, but he developed this trusty companion sometime during the 20th century. And we've been singing songs, as far as I know, forever about the prospect of Christmas. And then we began watching movies, and there are current crazes that we can't seem to escape from. The current one is, of course, Elf on the Shelf and Brian's variation, Lawyer in the Foyer. But there's endless Christmas fun stuff. So my first question goes to Brian. Brian, have you ever actually seen Santa?
I absolutely have. I've seen him in the records of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, among other places.
And so, can you tell us what Santa looks like in pictures?
Well, yes, I can. It's funny you should ask. Oh, wise one. So back in 1294, that's what Saint Nicholas looked like. By 1686, his costume had changed. The fur collar came. 1823, the night before Christmas, gave us some more details about Santa's appearance, although no picture. By 1865, Santa was looking pretty familiar. Then in 1902, Frank L. Baum, the person who wrote oh good heavens, thank you, Joel, The Wizard of Oz, wrote the life and adventures of Santa Claus that added a lot to the Claus lore. Then in 1930, Coca-Cola took over with a representation of Santa Claus that kind of cemented the modern view of Santa. And there's even a trademark registration on that version of Santa Claus. Moving on, the patents through the times, we have 1889 through 1920. It's looking kind of an old world there. Then in 1929 to 1934, some glimpses of the modern Santa and some glimpses back at the prior Santa. Uh, Again, from 39 to 49, some familiar aspects that we all know about Santa Claus. And then in the 50s, the mid-century Santa had still had the beard, had the funny coat, looked a little weird in 1953. There's a better version of a 53 Santa than a 55 and 64. So we're getting into more modern times. Uh, there's Santa in a snow globe, Santa in a lamp, Santa in a basket. And we pretty much applied Santa to just about anything and everything you can think of by the 90s, mid 90s. There he is, Santa taking a bath. Thought I'd really never had before and don't want to have again. And then there's a Santa bubble maker in 1998. So we've completely commercialized the poor saint. 99 through 2003, this Santa Claus, and then all the way now to the from 2011 to the present, Santa Claus is looking pretty familiar and standardized.
That's amazing. And so our next segment relates to Santa's trusty friend, Rudolph. And you probably think Rudolph has been there all along, but as they say, not so fast, my friend. So where does Rudolph come from? Well, let's see the next slide, and we can tell you. Rudolph didn't exist until 1939. That's right. Rudolph is an entire creation from the mind of Robert L. May. Now, Robert L. May is an interesting character, and you'll come to find out a rather successful character. He works for Montgomery Ward in Chicago, and each year the store, great big department store, gives stuff away. And they had been routinely each year and for each holiday event giving away a children's story in pamphlet form. And so this time he was tasked with writing up a Christmas story. And so he writes this story about Rudolph. Now, get this, Rudolph was not necessarily going to be Rudolph. It was going to be Rollo or Reginald. But Robert L. May settled on Rudolph. And let's see what the rest of the story has to say. So there is the original pamphlet that was handed out by Montgomery Ward. And of course, it says, you'll know Robert L. May because he's the author of Benny the Bunny Liked Beans. We all remember that story, don't we? I don't think we do. I think Benny the Bunny has not made any kind of impact. And so the story goes like this. He writes it as a poem, an anapestic tetrameter. This is the sort of thing only patent attorneys could fall in love with. And it happens to be the same as A Visit from St. Nicholas. You see, Brian here is getting carried away as Ed McMahon. Anyway, hands out 2.4 million copies that year. And so what does that mean? Well, it adds 95 years. And so we get out to this particular copyright expiring in 2034. But there's more to the story. Next slide. The story itself, we'll find out, is owned by the Rudolph Company. That's controlled by Mr. May and his I guess, inheritors and bequesters down the line. But there's an outfit called Character Arts that manages the licensing of the characters in the story. And then there's reprint rights for the original pamphlet are controlled by an outfit called Pearson PLC. So rights can get distributed all over the place. Next slide, please. Now, you may think that those other reindeer just kind of show up, but where did Rudolph come from? Well, as it turns out, Rudolph's parents are Mr. and Mrs. Donner. This is revealed in that 1964 sort of awkward special where we learn about Rudolph and the Island of Misfit Toys. Then there's Blitzen and Mitzi are introduced as parents in a 1998 film. Apparently, Donner and Mrs. Donner are cast aside. Rudolph has a brother, Rusty, a cousin, Arrow, and then uncles, Comet, Cupid, and Dasher, we're all familiar with. But then Leroy the Redneck shows up in a song at some point, and then Robbie is in there as well. So yes, 23andMe gave us this insight for us people here in a Santa hat. Next slide, please. Now, what about that song? You know, everybody, literally, in America, certainly most people on planet Earth have probably heard Gene Autry sing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And indeed, what happened was, after 10 years, Montgomery Ward gave the copyright back to Robert L. May, because after all, their view was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had completely played out by this time. And so they gave the copyright in Rudolph back to Robert L. May, whose brother-in-law is a songwriter, Johnny Marks. Johnny Marks writes the song. It's picked up by Gene Autry, and it becomes #1 on the charts the week of Christmas 1949. So what happens next? There's a movie. Now, the funny part of this movie is it wasn't made here in the States. If you've watched it, you'll know. It's made by the same folks that brought us the awful lizard shows, from Japan. The one that was going to attack the world, save the world. It was the nuclear
Godzilla.
lizard. And in any case, they ended up making this thing. And you can see it. But the funny part is, and Brian told me earlier this year, there's two types of people in the world, those who understand Roman numerals and those who never will. Well, whomever it was that applied for this copyright wrote down that this thing was published in 1164. As a result, whoa, there's no notice, you see, because copyrights back then required notice. But the story, let's not forget, is 95 years out from when it was created. So the story is protected, but the movie itself, good question. It may not be. Next slide, please. And so, does Rudolph also have other marks and protection? And the answer is, of course. And Rudolph exists in many forms in various registrations, many of which you may have seen. But, and here's a surprise, and Brian and Alana did not know I was going to show you this, but I have here in front of me a Rudolph from the 1960s. Now, what's interesting about this particular Rudolph is it is licensed by the Rudolph Red-Nosed Reindeer, owned by Robert L. May. And it is owned and under a patent by the Kohner brothers out of New York. And so here's a single toy. It's one of those collapsible things. And it is protected by several forms of IP. So really, Christmas, it's all about the IP. Next slide, please. Code word missile. Slightly different spelling from mistletoe, but it still gets the message across. Next slide. Let's sing some songs. Brian, what can you tell us about singing and avoiding incarceration when you do it?
Well, it helps to make sure you understand the copyright status of the song that you choose to sing. A lot of our favorite Christmas songs happen to be in the public domain, but those that don't will get you a call from one of the licensing companies, ASCAP or BMI, who will complain about your performance and charge you a royalty. So copyright protects any original work of authorship, and among those are the words and lyrics of a song. And more recently, copyright also includes the musical performance. So if we wanted some background music for this presentation, we could have used Jingle Bells, but because that copyright expired a long, long time ago. However, we'd have to find a performance that also had expired, because if we took a contemporary performance of it, the sound recording copyright would trip us up, even if the music copyright didn't. So it behooves to keep the license and know the license status. So a list, our holiday playlist, All I Want for Christmas Is You, Feliz Navidad, Frosty the Snowman, the more contemporary songs, obviously, those are going to cost you. You're going to need a license. But on the free list 2, some of the really old classics, the copyright is long since gone, and as long as you can find a long since gone performance, you're welcome to play those at your holiday party without royalty. And then, so, the history of some of these songs, I mean, these songs go surprisingly far back. Jingle Bells goes back to 1857, Deck the Halls, 1862, A Holy Night, 1847, Hark the Herald, 1739. So there's a lot of good music out there if you're wanting to avoid copyright problems, which is always a good idea. Um, and I think this is kind of your favorite song,
It,
John.
it
So why don't
is.
you take it from here?
Yes, on the music front, and just as a suggestion, helpful suggestion for your caroling in the event of arrest. Remember Brian Wheelock as the person to call if you're carted away, like in National Lampoon Christmas, where the Griswolds are invaded by the SWAT team toward the end of the movie. If that happens to you while you're singing at home, remember Brian's number. Maybe the only time ever where a call from prison to a patent attorney may be a useful undertaking. All right, White Christmas. Now, White Christmas is unique in that it's the number one song in the world, but where did it come from and how did it get there? Well, it's written by Irving Berlin. Interestingly, a Russian-born Jew who did not celebrate Christmas. He wrote it in 1940. He was one of these contract music writers and composers and so forth out in Hollywood. And he composed the song for a movie, Holiday Inn, and this was in 1942. The song, not the movie, but the song itself went to number one on the charts in 42, 43, 44. And it became number one across every song ever made. In fact, what's ironic here is when he wrote the song, he told his secretary, he was out in Palm Springs or something like that, celebrating in the hot weather, I guess. He goes, I want you to take down a song I wrote over the weekend. Not only is it the best song I ever wrote, it's the best song anybody ever wrote. Well, well, well. His statement there was certainly apocryphal because there are no fewer than 500 recorded versions with over 100 million each sold. Now, in song world, that is a lot. And you have to remember, new ones come out all the time because everybody does a cover of this stuff. And, who does covers of White Christmas? Well, look through the years. It's Sinatra, Perry Como, Elvis, Andy Williams, Otis Redding, Garth Brooks, Michael Bolton, Bette Midler, Andrea Bocelli, and I can assure you someone is doing it this year, which means this song will be protected in a performance of one form or another in perpetuity, even if the copyright to the bare song expires rather sooner than that in 2035. Next slide, please. It's very exciting stuff. Here's more on copyright and Christmas, but the thing to remember is Brian Wheelock and his phone number in the event of incarceration.
So,
And anyone for a movie?
I can talk. It's a Wonderful Life was initially is a 1946 movie, but it was initially received pretty mixed reviews and was very unsuccessful, lost a ton of money. So when the copyright came up for renewal back before the 76 Act, the 1909 Act, you got a 28-year copyright term, and you had to renew it for the additional 28 for a princely sum of about $20. The copyright came up and the studio decided, well, that movie wasn't much. So they neglected to renew the copyright registration, allowing it to lapse, the movie to lapse into the public domain without any licensing or royalty fees. And that's when the TV stations looking for Christmas content said, whoa, free movie to broadcast. So they broadcasted seemingly around the clock, for several years in the mid 70s, till everyone decided, hey, that's a pretty good movie after all. Who doesn't like a good suicide story at Christmas time?
Right.
But eventually they discovered that, and this is the fun thing about copyright. Well, the movie's copyright expired. The original story's copyright had not. So there was still royalty control over the showing of the movie because the movie followed the story and you would infringe the copyright in the story. So whenever you have a combined work with music, with image, moving images, and speech, there could be multiple copyrights that you need to negotiate to do that, and that's what the current TV stations have to do to broadcast that movie. Now they still need to pay licensing or royalty fees, even though the lack of them is what made the movie, a hit. Um, so although the clerical error caused them to let the copyright lapse, we know now that you're still paying stories because the original story, The Greatest Gift, was a story written by Philip Van Doren, and Philip or his heirs were smart enough to renew that copyright in 1971. And that's why there's still protection on the movie anyhow. And then there's one more slide that I wanted to show. And so there is Philip Van Doren's original story. On the left side, it was actually his kind of Christmas card to his friends. And there's a signed version of it. And that version of his story sold in a private auction for $18,600 because it was signed, written and signed by the original author. So kind of somebody got a Christmas present that year for that. And then I know this is one of John's favorite things to talk about, the current elf craze.
Well, the current elf craze, every year at Christmas time, something shows up, right? That is on top of mind for everybody. And Elf on the Shelf is that thing right now. My grandkids are crazy for it. They make sure my children make sure they move it, and daughter-in-law make sure they move it every night, so the kids wake up, see it in a different place. I personally think it's kind of creepy, but they love it. Okay. This Elf on the Shelf thing. I don't like the gaze of that thing. I'm convinced it's, possessed or has a camera in it or something like that. But in any case, you can see that once these things start, they take on a life of their own. And here, just in the short time that Elf on the Shelf has been around, you can see the variety of federal registrations that already exist, for what you'd think is how many variations on Elf on a Shelf can you possibly have? Well, a lot, as it turns out. Here we go. More Elf on a Shelf doll. There's girls and boys because, we want to cover all the bases. We have various Christmas versions of Elf on the Shelf. I don't know what other version there might be, except, why would an elf be sitting on your shelf in July? But, here we go. All of the variations on Elf on the Shelf. And then the elf doesn't want to be alone, so the elf has pets. And so you've got reindeer pets, and you've got other accompanying things with the elf. So I guess as the elf moves around, all his friends go with him. I wonder if they all have that creepy gaze, that, the unblinking eye that is constantly seeking seeking you.
The all-seeing eye.
The all-seeing eye. But Brian has a variation. I think that's in the next slide.
Right. So in addition, so the Elf on the Shelf has all those trademark registrations and all these copyright registrations. And it's not too long before you get a lawyer in the foyer trying to enforce those rights. And so in the CC and B versus 3C world case, this was a Schedule A case brought by the owners of Elf on the Shelf. So we included this one mostly to talk about Schedule A cases because combating infringement abroad is very difficult. Everyone pops up on the internet with on the Amazon and other stores selling stuff and then go away just as fast, taking their money. So some inventive lawyers, well, this I think originated up in the Northern District of Illinois, started filing Schedule A cases where they listed all the defendants on a confidential Schedule A. They filed the case without notice. to the defendants. They got a preliminary injunction against these defendants without the defendants knowing or participating, and even got all the assets, the online assets, frozen. And then only after everything had been locked down do they reveal to the defendants what has happened to them. And so this has worked and worked fairly well in the Northern District of Illinois until this summer, when one of the judges realized, wait a minute, we used to have something here called due process. There's a slide about Schedule A. It was Judge Ness in the Northern District, and he said that this raises serious due process and procedural concerns. Oh, what a stunning revelation, especially around ex parte relief, sealed filings, asset freezes, and the mass joinder of largely unidentified defendants. If you looked at from the original slide, there were 152 defendants listed in Schedule A, 104 of whom were trademark infringers, and 99 of whom were actually copyright infringers. The court did enter that injunction and awarded $16.8 million in statutory damages before the defendants knew what was happening to them. So it was pretty successful, but Judge Ness said that we really need to rethink this in the Northern District. Since then, I've seen the Schedule A case filed in the Northern District of Georgia, figuring maybe the news doesn't travel that far south. And sadly, even in our own district here, the Eastern District of Missouri, a Schedule A case was recently filed. Again, hoping we don't, follow what's going on in our neighbor city to the north. But Schedule A cases may still be a valid way to enforce rights against mass infringers like this. Although Judge Ness has other thoughts, so I guess I'd stay out of Chicago, which is maybe a good idea anyhow.
So we have a dupe in there. Let's watch a movie. Let's go on to the next one. More Christmas. And so where does Christmas as we know it come from? Well, it comes from intellectual property, of course. And so I'm going to give you a light touch, and then we're going to see examples, myriad examples of all of this. So Christmas lights. Now, all have Christmas lights. The latest edition of these things are LEDs. When I was a kid, these lights were too hot to touch. You'd wrap them around the tree and you would fry yourself if you went to try and move them or something like that. I mean, burns on your hand. Well, this was developed by Ed Johnson, none other than an associate of Thomas Edison and, light bulb fame, Edison Illumination. And here's the thing. Lights were expensive and electricity was expensive. And so Ed Johnson was trying to come up with what to do with all this surplus electricity. And so he took some Edison light bulbs. He made them red, white, and blue because he's a patriot after all. And he wrapped them around a tree in his front room. And it rotated. And so this is the first use of electric lights anywhere in the world, right here in America, in New York City, back in 1882. And the idea was to sell more of what they already had to offer, but this time with a Christmas theme. Tinsel, where'd it come from? Well, not surprisingly, the Germans pretty much are the ones who decided that a Christmas tree was a good idea. They sang about it and so forth. And they decided it shouldn't just sit there. It should be decorated. And so they came up with tinsel. It's going to look like some sort of an icicle. And get this, they were made from actual silver. And that sounds preposterous, but true. And after World War II, they were made out of aluminum. But what you may not know is that aluminum was as expensive as silver during World War II because the Hall process to make aluminum, patented, is a very expensive process because it uses a tremendous amount of electricity. And so often wedding gifts in the immediate post-World War II era were either silver or something called hammered aluminum. And I know this because my parents have a bunch of hammered aluminum stuff. And that was considered to be as nice or nicer than silver at the time. Candy canes, Germany, 1670. Get this. These things existed, but it took a choir master to bend it and create the shepherd's hook. Why would that make a difference? because the nativity scene, you have shepherds with crooks that I guess they can lick because they're peppermint. So there you go. It was a candy cane invented in Germany as well. Next, we have Scotch tape. Now, this is kind of a funny story because it assumes a knowledge of, as they say, associations back in the day. So 3M, of course, makes some masking tape. And what do you know? They don't put enough glue on it. And so the reviewer of the masking tape says, tell those Scotch bosses of yours to put on more adhesive. Now, Scott and Scotland and those sorts of things, but particularly Scott, was an implication that it was not very expensive, okay? And so they were saving money on glue, but the label stuck. Scotch tape comes from an inferior product made in 1925. And then it was converted into the clear cellulose that we know now, the cellulose tape. And that was originally developed as a food package sealer, of course, patented, because you could see through it. So instead of pondering what was in that package, you could actually see through that package and see whatever it was that you were buying. So there you go, the story of several things that you will use this Christmas.
And moving on, if you look through the patent collection, you'll see that Christmas has been applied to everything. Here's a design patent on a CD-ROM, which the younger people in the audience won't even know what those are, but some of us remember. Those who certainly everyone who knows Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon would remember. So there's a Christmas tree CD-ROM. There's a Christmas wrapper for cigars, and there's a bunch of patents on Christmas themed pasta, Christmas tree pasta, another Christmas tree pasta, and even a Santa Claus pasta. John, you want to?
Yeah, it turns out you can get a Christmas themed anything. Here is a carabiner, which I know all of us think of when we look at a Christmas tree. You think of climbing and ropes and carabiners and stuff like that. Well, there you go. Christmas tree carabiner. Next. Now, this is quite interesting. It's a tea bag. And so it's something that in use you're probably not observing, but on the way to your cup, who can help but be inspired by the Christmas tree shaped tea bag? Next up. More fun with your mailbox. You don't want to receive your holiday cards in some dull old mailbox. You want something that is inspiring. And so this is a Christmas themed mailbox. Next up. Here is something you didn't know you needed. It is a Christmas tree cake pop mold. Because after all, nothing says Christmas like a cake pop in the shape of a Christmas tree. Next up. This is an LED lantern. We're headed for high tech in everything. And so I expect this was to keep grandma from getting run over by that reindeer. Had she only had this lantern, maybe she would have been seen. We will never know. But had she had the lantern, perhaps. Next. This is something, no pressure out there, guys, but apparently there is a trend that indeed the proposal of marriage is something that lands on big holidays like Christmas. And so you need an inspired ring box. That is Santa Claus presenting the ring. Nothing says I love you like a Santa ring box.
I'm kind of curious exactly where you put the ring there, but I think I know.
And of course, nothing like apparel. Here is a Santa hoodie. Now, I can't believe, KSR was just applied to design patents just this year. And I can't help but think that putting a Santa hat on a hoodie would be a sincerely obvious thing to do. But hey, this was before KSR was applied to design. So there you have it, the Santa hoodie. But wait, there's more in apparel land. Next up, we have the Santa hat, which impossibly includes ear protection. Who would have thought of that in the North Pole, that you needed ear protection on your Santa hat? Wow, where's KSR when you need it? Well, apparently it wasn't there in 2013. Next up, Brian, here we have cookies. Who doesn't like cookies? And cookies in the shape of things we associate with Christmas, like stars and trees and gifts with bows. How fun is that? More hats. Who could have seen this coming? A Santa baseball cap. But wait, there's more. You can't have one Santa baseball cap. Oh no. There's a second Santa baseball cap, because the first one was floppy. This one is not so floppy. And so I don't know if Santa would wear this one. He would certainly wear the other one. But anyway, yeah, there's more than one Santa baseball cap out there. And then, of course, you can't but have a holiday vest. I mean, if you're going to have an ugly sweater party, it seems to me you can have an ugly vest party. Or if you don't feel like wearing a sweater, I think you can wear the ugly vest and get away with it at the sweater party. And of course, we have all sorts of lit things that are in the shape of Christmas themes. There's and we'll find out more about Christmas lights as we go along, but there's a tree for you, just in case, you know. Here are more things. This is a multi-tool. You didn't see this coming. Now, you know the Nutcracker, you know, the implication is that nuts will be cracked, but you didn't know what else would happen with the Nutcracker in the shape or the multi-tool in the shape of a Nutcracker, and then the Frosty the Snowman version over there. I am sort of an aficionado of multi-tools because I think they're nifty, and I've never seen one of these, at least not at retail. Protects a macrame frame Santa head, just in case you needed to know what Santa looked like in macrame. This is the answer, at least one answer. And now, getting modern, we have a drone. And the reason we have the drone is because after you have revealed to the kids that you've seen Santa, they're going to want proof. And if you have a drone, you can pull this off, but you got to get it to go across the moon like they do in every movie you've ever seen. Santa manages to be silhouetted against the moon. So get the kids out there, and hopefully you've got a moon, and then you can pull this off. And of course, anybody who thinks they're Christmas oriented needs a CD rack in the shape of a Christmas tree. You want to eat Christmas? You can. This is a Santa shaped chocolate. You know, don't stop at cookies. Go with the chocolate. There's more to eat, you will see. This is a Christmas tree-shaped chocolate. The other one was a Santa chocolate. So, you know, one of each. Why not? And then, you know, who can put things in a scrapbook about Christmas unless the scrapbook itself is a Santa Claus scrapbook? Memories of Santa can only go in a Santa Claus scrapbook. This one, I think, Brian, is odd. Now, before your mind wanders, this is a vibrator, but it's a vibrator for a Christmas tree. Now, if you've ever seen the Griswold Family Christmas, what happens when the cat chews on the electrical cord and the whole tree disappears in a flash of flame. I would think if you attached a vibrator to a Christmas tree, it would soon look like that tree in the Griswold Christmas Adventure because all the needles would be shaken off. But anyway, for those of you that want to see your tinsel shake on the tree, this is the way you would go about it. I can't imagine they sold many of these. This is from 1947. And of course, we need a Santa Claus detector. I think everybody needs a Santa Claus detector. And so we know he's coming down the chimney. We know he's got at least one stop, and that's to fill the stockings. And so clearly we need to detect Santa while Santa is there. And so this is cleverly disguised as a stocking hung on a mantle with care. Santa will never see it. You'll get the whole thing. Kids, your credibility with your kids will go way, way up. Food mold, because you can't eat Jell-O that doesn't look like a Christmas tree during December. A method of making a garland. This one is kind of a mystery. I wonder what the garland turns out to look like. That looks sort of like a snowflake, and so maybe that is what they're after. And then we have all sorts of mechanization associated with Christmas. This is a thing that eventually will turn out a tinsel garland. And we used to use these all the time, wrap them around trees. The foil stuff. I don't see them so much anymore. Don't know why, but these used to be a regular Christmas staple, the garlands that you would, put around railings around your tree and all that sort of stuff. This next one, though, just takes the fun out of it. I love to wrap packages. It's a fault, I know, but I love to wrap packages. And imagine if you had a Christmas package wrapping machine. How dull would life be? But anyway, there's a couple of them out there. Christmas, I can't imagine anything wrapped other than a rectangular package. I can't see it wrapping a broom or a guitar or a pair of skis or something like that. But I think
Wait a minute. Did you really give your wife a broom for Christmas?
No, I promise I didn't.
That's
Not
why you're still here.
not this year anyway. It was a vacuum. It was an automated broom. And here is, making covers, candy canes. And so, the Germans created, we automate it. See how that works. Candy canes by the thousands. Here is another machine for making candy canes because the first one, I guess, not quite fast enough. Now, food. Brian, would you like to talk about food?
Sure. Food is a staple of the Christmas holiday and a lot of holidays, really. And so if you came up with a new fruit cake or something, what could you do about it? Well, you might be able to get a patent on it because compositions that matter are patentable. And I'm sure John remembers the soft cookie craze and all the patents that spawned probably 30 years ago. So you could get a patent. Could you get a copyright, on your ingredients list? Well, not really. This is the copyright circular talks about recipes, and you even if you got a copyright on the list of ingredients, it wouldn't stop you from assembling those ingredients. So it's not necessarily, the best route for protection. And so the Copyright Office gives you examples that merely because you copyright a recipe doesn't mean someone else can't come up with the same or very similar recipe. They just can't describe the recipe with the same terms you describe, other than the ingredients, which are not, copyrightable. But there have been quite a few copyright cases involving, recipes. And in Schliefer versus Burns, which wasn't a Christmas case. It involved cookbooks on Ethiopian foods, and the defendant there, after plaintiff wrote a book with Ethiopian recipes, wrote another book with different Ethiopian recipes, and was trying to claim, well, I got the shtick. I'm the Ethiopian recipe guy, and you can't write that book. And of course, was completely unsuccessful because that's not what copyright is about. Um, but there another famous copyright case involving recipes was Jerry Seinfeld's wife was sued for writing a cookbook that had the same idea as the Sneaky Chef. The author of Sneaky Chef came up with a bunch of recipes to hide vegetables from your kids in food, how to mask them and otherwise keep it. And that was something that Jessica Seinfeld also wrote about. She called hers Deceptively Delicious. But that's where the similarity in the books end. And that so Lapine lost that case because copyright doesn't protect ideas. It only protects the expression of those ideas. But sometimes, a better way to protect a recipe might be to keep it secret. And in Warman versus Local Yokels, Warman has made a trade secret claim about his fudge recipe and actually won an injunction and $250,000 in damages for someone boosting his fudge recipe. So sometimes the best IP protection is to shut up and just keep it a secret. But you can, if you need to, get patents on food stuff. So here's a design patent on a stocking shaped food stuff. It sounds very appetizing, doesn't it? And then here's a design patent on an edible Christmas tree, if that's where you go. Then I don't know who in the audience has seen our holiday card this year, but the theme of the card was the history of Christmas lights. And if that didn't put you to sleep, I'm here to help. We have a near exhaustive history of Christmas tree illumination, starting back in the 16th century when the cathedral was placed in the cathedral at Strasbourg. And the tradition of candlelit Christmas trees was maintained and brought to the U.S. by German immigrants. As John mentioned, Germans are all things Christmas tree in the early 1800s. So we have the same tradition. And in fact, there are a large number of patents on candle holders for Christmas trees, or as I like to call them, fuses. But the problem was recognized early on that these will cause a serious fire if you're not careful. And a lot of the patents are directed to ways to stop the candle from setting your tree and subsequently your house on fire during the holidays. The first patent on a candle holder for Christmas trees was back in 1867. They went through all sorts of iterations. Well, we'll make oil lamps, which wasn't really any better. It still had the open flame, and lanterns, and the same thing. There was still a flame. As John mentioned earlier in this program, flame was the only practical source of light until Edison came up with the electric light bulb in 1880. And as John mentioned, it was a Edison associate, Edward Johnson, who set up a Christmas tree on his street side window of his New York townhome. And as John said, 80 red, white, and blue lights were strung together and put it on a revolving pedestal that also had an Edison electric motor, all powered by an Edison generator. So he was not just a colleague, but a big promoter of Thomas. Yeah. And there is a picture of the first electrically lit Christmas tree. And it was quite a sensation. It was covered by the papers as far away as the Detroit Post and Tribune, talking about it, and headlined in other outlets as well. So from there, the next stop was the first patent in 1892 on an electric string of lights. And there's the patent, of course. The first White House tree was in 1889, just a few years earlier, and it was lit by candles. The first electric Christmas lights in the White House were 5 years later in 1894, 3 years after introduction of electricity in the White House. As John said, we got all this darn electricity floating around. What are we going to do with it? So they lit the tree to the great delight of the daughters of Grover Cleveland. Um, in 1903, General Electric, which was an Edison company, at least as it's when it started, began to offer Christmas lights in 8 lamp strings called festoons. They were pre-wired, had porcelain sockets, and sold for the princely sum back then of $12 for three sets. They were so expensive to the average person that the department stores would rent them to you for $1.50 at Christmas season. Can you imagine renting your Christmas lights? Um, but maybe they would have to untangle them for you, so that it might have been worth it. There's the General Electric light sets. They came in a wooden box. They look pretty rustic, and they're the General Electric bulbs. Um, and there's an Edison ad for the lighting outfits that they were selling back at the time. The national Christmas tree didn't appear lit until 1923 when Silent Cal Coolidge threw the switch on December 24. Um, so the original Christmas light, incandescent Christmas lights in 1919, they were cone shaped to look like a flame. Everyone missed the candles except for the fires. Then in 24, they came out with a shaped C6, which were sharply pointed cones. It wasn't until 34 that we got to the familiar C7 shape that you still see out there with kind of more rounded bottoms to them. And that was been the Christmas light standard until recently. In 44, the bubble lights were patented. The bubble lights use the heat of the light bulb to create little bubbles in a lovely display through the highly toxic methylene chloride contained in the tube. So those are no longer, no longer sold for obviously good reasons. And then the aluminum Christmas tree was introduced in 55 and was popular into the mid 60s. They were, and some were still manufactured in the 70s. And you may remember those. They, the several companies up in Chicago and Wisconsin produced them, and they had ads in the Sears catalog, among other places. Um, uh, but they sold for retail for $25, wholesaled for 11 and a quarter, including the popular evergreen tree, which sold more than 1 million copies back in the 50s. However, there was one problem with the illumination of aluminum tree. The whole tree is electrically conductive, and so it's not a good idea to festoon your electric lights on the aluminum tree. So they went back to stage productions that had color wheels. And back in the 50s and the early 60s, I remember our neighbors' friends had these, and you'd see the color wheel change, and it would reflect on the tree changing color. But the whole aluminum tree craze actually crashed in 1965. In 1965, there was the first year they aired the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And Lucy Van Pelt told Charlie Brown to go get a big shiny aluminum tree, maybe one painted pink, for the group's nativity play. But Charlie Brown had second thoughts, lamenting the commercialization of Christmas, and eschewed the aluminum trees for that small, scrawny, natural tree that he came up with. And after Charlie Brown's speech, which I think there it is, we can play.
British is right. I won't let all this commercialism in my Christmas. I'll take this sweet tree home and decorate it. And I'll show them it really will work in our play. Nice. Oh well, this commercial dog is not going to ruin my Christmas. I've killed it. Yes. Never thought it was such a bad little tree. It's not bad at all, really. Maybe it just needs a little love. Charlie Brown is a blockhead, but he did get a nice tree.
So that spelled the death of aluminum Christmas trees, which are regarded as commercial. In the years after the Charlie Brown special, it was very popular to have almost a purposely ugly tree, Charlie Brown Christmas tree. If not your main Christmas tree, you put it someplace in the house. I know we had one growing up, and it tanked the market. And by '67, it was hard to come by a tree, all because people took to heart Charlie Brown's message. After that, in the '70s, fiber optic Christmas trees with the little sprays of lights were popular. And then in 2022, someone patented a hologram tree that projects a virtual tree in your living room.
Oh
And
gosh.
so that brings us up to date on the history of Christmas trees. Do you want to talk about this case, John, or shall I just wrap this one up?
I think we can skip that one, but it goes to show that people are fighting over things at Christmas time, just like always. Anything that's created can be the subject of a dispute, as it turns out.
Absolutely, and the Christmas spirit notwithstanding. So one thing, the Christmas takeover, one thing that people forget is that if you license a copyright after January 1st of 1978, that's when the 76 Act took effect. The original grantor has the right to march in between 35 and 40 years and take the copyright back. And there's just a ton of litigation, not so much by the original grantors, they're long since dead, but a bunch of squabbling descendants trying to reclaim copyrights and reinvigorate the work. So you can't really get a copy, and you can't defeat this. It's statutory. Your attempt to say it doesn't count and your license doesn't count. So you can really not get a copyright license for more than a guaranteed 35 to 40 years. Although if they don't retake it, then it goes on for the rest of the life of the copyright. But it's something to bear in mind that if you license something today, 35 years from now, fortunately long past I'll be carrying, the rights may go away.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead, John.
So wrapping up, mistletoe is everywhere at Christmas time. And so we have some patents on just where that mistletoe might go. And so here are some that we think are in reasonable taste. They're on hats, you see. Kiss me. And more hats and headbands and stuff like that. Again, all perfectly within the theme of Christmas and, good tidings. We have even some riffs, dad jokes, mistletoe. Get it? Mistletoe. Yeah. See, that's funny. If you're a dad, these are the sorts of things that you can't help but chuckle at. And then we have those in poor taste. And this is, I thought the patent office had rules against this, but there you go. And so that brings us to the end of our IP Christmas wrap up. All things IP, all things Christmas. We hope you've had fun. We did. Brian, any good tidings to send them off with?
Gosh, I wish I had prepared something. Just thanks for listening, and have a good Christmas.
Merry Christmas.